What is up, speedsters? Welcome to a brand new Flash breakdown and review. Now, this is for episode 4, titled Central City Strong. Now, this is a fairly straightforward video to speak about, I feel, in terms of this episode, because there was a few takeaways in terms of what we learned in this episode about certain things, which definitely set up some fascinating future Flash stuff, as well as mysterious whatever the heck that was at the end of the episode, but we kind of probably do know what it is, but stay around for that. And of course, David the Smolcian returning as Abracadabra. Now, usually I would view this kind of episode, if you will, as a villain of the week, and it kind of is, but I don't really view David the Smolcian that way, because he's a great actor. He's been in movies from The Dark Knight to Ant-Man and the Wasp to shows like Gotham to The Flash that we've seen before, and I really did feel like in this episode, if it was anyone else or anyone of that kind of typical CW villain of the week type that they cast, this episode wouldn't nearly been as good as what it was. And I'm not saying this episode was off the charts amazing. It was actually just decent enough. For what it did pretty well. At least it wasn't last week's episode. And at the end of the day, this is technically the premiere episode, if you will, for season 7. But I didn't expect premiere level kind of stuff in it. This episode started off with that kind of residual lightning in the distance outside Barry and Iris's apartment. Now, I'm not sure if this was just meant to set up the kind of strength force monster we got at the end of the episode. At least that's what I'm interpreting it as. I think probably everyone is. Could have meant the other forces at the same time. I can't really remember the colors from the top of my head. But either way, bottom line with that is it's definitely meant to tease the fact there are other forces out there. The strength force, the sage force, the still force, as well as the speed force now. And just like what I said in last week's review, I'm still not massive on that idea, even from the comics. I just kind of prefer there to be one force. I'm not going to judge it too much right now, even though I don't like the idea of imagining what could come. I just think, yeah, okay, well, Barry's going to run into a strength force, guys. Going to have to take him down. Barry's going to have to run into a still force. Do you see what I mean? But they may do it very, very well. But that's kind of my feelings going into that storyline this season. Now, after the wreckage of Mirror Monarch, we had Team Flash rebuilding the city, but we also had little teasers for later on in the episode with Caitlin and her headache. I thought this was going to be a thing of Killer Frost going bad. I definitely didn't expect what we got later on. And just like tradition, Abracadabra was once again this episode used to tease 2 future things, of which I'm very fascinated with. Number 1, he says to Barry that I'm doing you a favor by killing you now, Flash. This way you'll never have to face the wrath of the Chronarch. Now, that is going to be obviously one of Barry's future endeavors with Team Flash and who he's up against. And technically, if I remember correctly, I think Abracadabra even has a history with the Chronarch. I believe they are rulers in the far, far future. I think going as far as the 64th century. I believe they even banished Abracadabra back to the 21st century. But either way, let's just say they have a very kind of strict ideology on ruling, if you will. But I'm more fascinated by the other comment that Abracadabra made about the future Flash later on, but we'll save that for that final confrontation between both characters. Along the way, with some of Argus's help, and that guy definitely did seem like a hologram, so like let me know in the comments if you do think that he was, because that could have been like an inside but also obvious joke. But this is where we started getting some of the explanation as to what his motive was for coming to Central City and trying to destroy it in this episode. So he says that the last time they met, Flash begged him to find a glimmer of light in himself. And he says he found that light, that hope, but Flash stole it from him. And as a result, he wants to take something from Flash, which is to more or less destroy Central City with an antimatter bomb. Yet again, I do really want to heavily emphasize the difference between this villain of the week and that of what you may typically get on a CW show. His acting in this moment was really on point. His eyes were like glazing up with tears, with such emotion at remembering his other family. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every villain of the week is bad. It's just I wish they were all on this level. Either way, in a very Snyder Cutty reminiscent way, maybe I've been watching it too much, Abracadabra kind of forges and fuses those crystally little things together, forms the unity, if you will, which then creates this antimatter bomb. With Team Flash talking about how bad this is, with how it's made from pure Valorium, and the only impenetrable thing to it is antimatter itself. You can't phase through it. Barry is really frustrated because he just feels like he's been fooled again. Now this brings me to kind of all of the Iris talk with what was going on with her this episode, which, you know, we knew that this would be happening because months and months ago, it feels like a year ago, how Iris was going to be kind of dealing with the repercussions of the Mirrorverse. So initially we had Allegra criticizing Iris's report for the Central City Citizen. She starts relating to the story of the Mirrorverse Survivor Group members. She went there to write a story initially, but she should really be checking in there herself, which she does later on do. But we also had Barry in his own guilt really trying to make up things to Iris for, I guess, how bad he feels in terms of how he couldn't save her sooner, and this, that, and the other, I guess. So he's been whisking her off all around the world, basically globally, going on holiday. To be fair, though, like, wouldn't you do that? Like, if your other half was like a speedster, and you could just run to the pyramids in Egypt within, like, a couple of minutes, give or take, I would do that. Like, wouldn't you just chill there for like an hour and then just go back home? That would be such an opportunity. Could you imagine how much, like, this is just random, but just imagine how many times in universe, in your head, Barry and Iris have just done whatever the heck they've wanted on planet Earth. This is why being a speedster would be my #1 choice for a superpower. But in this moment, Iris said a line that was very obviously intended to be her own advice. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you should take your own advice, but that's it. You could see that's exactly what the writers were doing right there with her saying something terrible happened to you, not because of you, and that kind of trauma, that doesn't go away in a day or a week. You have to face it. So as I said, that's exactly what she does later on in the episode towards the end, where she really needed to kind of come to terms, along with other survivors as well, being gone, I think, for 3 months, she said. That's quite a while to be in the Mirrorverse. But moving onwards and upwards, we found out in the little cube that they broke into from Abracadabra's, it contained the Martian Memory Restorer, which is a device built by Cisco which helped people get their pre-crisis memories back with a single touch. We did get a little reference to Laurel Lance and Mia Queen in that moment, because I believe, if I remember correctly, that was the very device that was used to trigger Mia Queen's memories back from Crisis in the Green Arrow and the Canaries backdoor pilot that they had in one of the final episodes of Arrow. What we could have had in that episode instead of that episode. But anyway, and this is more or less where it leads up to that kind of final confrontation moment, because they figured that he must have unlocked some memories from the previous timeline before Crisis affected and changed everything. That gave him the motive to do this. So in this moment, Barry learns that Abracadabra's family is from that other timeline, and that 13 months ago, he had dreams of a life he never had, one where he was so happy, and he figured, because he's obviously from the future, he's very smart, that he must be suffering from some temporary neuro displacement, which is most commonly in this world as a result of the interaction or disruptions of a speedster. And as a result of this, he decides to go to the Flash Museum, but in this moment, he literally says, "You're obsessed with the future Flash. Not now, but you will be." And this really has me intrigued. It always does when it comes to future timey-wimey stuff, and this isn't necessary. I suppose it is timey-wimey if it's Flash, and then you combine that with future. I know people get apprehensive because, you know, this sometimes often introduces bigger problems when you meddle with future things or past things, but I want to know. I want to know what he's obsessed with about in the future. Why would Barry be obsessed with the future? I can't really figure it out right now. Maybe when we get around to Godspeed this season, maybe he's fascinated with the future and obsessed with it because the Godspeed's from the future. Unless they're going to retcon that this season, then the Godspeed we're up against is a speedster from the present as a result of the artificial speed force sending out all those. It could go a billion different ways, but one thing we know, thanks to Abracadabra, is that Barry, in his own words, becomes obsessed about the future. Not now, but he will. Long story short here, Abracadabra's family got completely yeeted out the timeline because of Crisis, and because of that kind of sweet, almost that very bittersweet taste of a happy life, that drove him into borderline madness and just like, screw it, I'm gonna absolutely... I kind of understand his motivations. It's actually really tragic. And if it wasn't paired with David Dastmalchian and it was anyone else, I would be struggling to really be, I would say, into this episode as much as I was. Barry does try to relate to him, saying he lost Oliver. Crisis was kind of unfair on everyone. They eventually come to a resolution to the point of where they shake hands in an effort to not be mortal enemies in the future. But just as they were shaking hands, that's when the seismic activity returns, which was echoed throughout this episode, which I should have mentioned earlier. It was heading right towards Barry, and then lo and behold... Sorry, I'm just struggling to figure out what to say this is. A massive... gymnastic wearing, I don't know, like monstery kind of hulked out person arrives on the scene, and yeah, I don't know how I felt about this. The CGI was very but it's also very typical of that of the CW kind of CGI. The only thing I was worried about here, I was like, okay, so if this is going to be the Strength Force person, and we're going to have to see a bit more of this person, which we undoubtedly are because of the way things left off, I just, So this person's someone to worry about because not only are they likely infused with the Strength Force, but they absorbed the antimatter bomb, which I don't know how they did that. I'm guessing the unique properties of the Strength Force can allow them to withstand such a blow, maybe, but that's insane. This is antimatter we're talking about, but I suppose, as they said themselves, the Speed Force is like an elemental part of the universe. So I guess now we've got other forces. They may be elemental parts that can't be counteracted by antimatter. That's my comic book logic as to how the big person survived. Now, I have to admit, I just have to put this in here. This is only like a constructive criticism. When Abracadabra said, let's see how you like this trick, and then he just held his wand there was such a long pause before the big person came and just yeeted him and killed him to when he started his trick. So he said, let's see how you like this trick. And he just stands there. I would have liked it if they would have added some kind of swirly effects in the air of a spell being cast and then he got hit. But he literally just stands there. And then it's like allowing someone to go towards you and then hit you. And he's like, oh, like it was just like this. Why? Why? Now, as a result of Philippe dying, and Barry was just like, what have you done? Which is, it is really sad because this guy's meant to kind of be going on in the future as well. And that they could have actually been allies and that could have come back in the future storyline. He casts off some speedster lightning and big person just absorbs it. And that was more or less it from the big person. Now, I have to admit, I did really laugh at the line where they said, what was that thing anyway? And then Cecile was like, death itself, maybe. I'm sorry, it's just that was meant to be really serious, like death itself. But when I look at this, I don't think of a line included in the Flash to be like, what is that thing anyway? Death itself, maybe. No, like, I mean, really? End of the episode, Allegra gets promoted staff writer. Sucks to be you, Camilla. And interestingly, Caitlin separates from Killer Frost. I actually really like this idea. It's going to be interesting to see how they tackle it because of the techniques that have to be used to obviously film two Daniel Panabakers. Obviously, we're at a very good level with that in today's age where there's literal shows made off of that, like Orphan Black. But yeah, looking forward to this. I think this could cause issues as well. Killer Frost now literally has her own life all the time. She doesn't have to borrow the body of Caitlin. That could lead to some recklessness. I mean, sure, we've had exploration into Killer Frost kind of taking over Caitlin's body and kind of learning to be herself and going out in the world and kind of feeling free to do things for the first time. But this is going to be that, but 2.0, if you know what I mean. She's going to be really free to do anything. But yeah, I would love to know what you think of that, guys. So yeah, what did you think of this overall episode? As a Season 7 premiere, if you will, it wasn't obviously what you'd expect because it technically wasn't the premiere, but it was also something when we look at the strict storylines that are now Season 7. So we've got multiple forces now. Strength Force, Speed Force, Sage Force, Still Force. We have Barry as the Speedster, but technically there was another Speedster bolt that's sent out with all those forces. So there could be another Speedster, that could be Godspeed later on. We've got the Strength Force seemingly now with the big person who's in like gymnastic, either way. And yeah, Abracadabra was a good meta of the week. That teased even more stuff like Flash being obsessed with the future, which I am now obsessed with. I'm sorry, one of my favorite reasons for loving Season 3, despite all the flaws it had, is the future Flash stuff. I'm a sucker for stuff like that. I'm really biased to it, to be honest. I'm fully transparent about that. That's why I can still dig the premise of Season 3 so much. But anyway, guys, I'm going to leave this there. I would love to know everything you thought, obviously. All your theories on stuff I speculated about myself. You can definitely check me out more by following me on Twitter in the top pinned comment. Check that out. Top pinned comment at the top of the comment section has links to my Discord server, my Twitter, places you could get beanies like this if you want to support the channel further. Join the channel as well for superhero membership. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.